Assalamu alaikum, Brother Fawzan. Just if you give us a minute, inshallah, you're the first one to join. Brothers and sisters, we'll just give maybe, first of all, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We'll give maybe 30 seconds before we begin, inshallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Amma ba'd. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Once again, I'd like to welcome you all here to virtual Masjid Al-Farooq. So we're going to have this program, inshallah, on a daily basis. So today I will be speaking. Today we don't have a guest speaker, but inshallah, guest speakers back again tomorrow, inshallah, Wednesday, will be Sheikh Malik Claire. So brothers and sisters, I just wanted to give a brief reminder, inshallah. And today I wanted to go over a very important hadith that has an important message, especially for us living in this part of the society and this part of the world and this era where, alhamdulillah, many of us have access to, by the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, abundance. But we need a reminder, brothers and sisters, living in, as I said, in this situation. There's a hadith that gives us an important reminder. It reminds us that the wealth and prosperity are a great test. And I have some hadith to share with you later on that. But we have to keep it in mind that, yes, hardship and difficulties are a test, but prosperity, good times, an abundance of wealth, or whatever it is, abundance in general, is also a serious test that we have to keep in mind. So this hadith talks about reminding us to be careful, from the temptation of shaitan, especially when we have access to, wealth, and that gives us opportunities to achieve status. So I'll go over this hadith, inshallah, and then try to explain it a little bit. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ma dhi'bani ضاريان يأتيان في غنم غاب رعاؤها بأفسد للناس من حب الشرف والمال لدين المؤمن." So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, two ravenous wolves which spend the night amongst the sheep whose shepherd is absent will not cause more havoc for the people than will the love of status and the love of wealth to the believer's deen. So this deserves a little bit of explanation. So this is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam giving an analogy or a parable or a similitude, describing, using one thing to describe the similarities to another thing. So this hadith is actually so exact, okay, in terms of, what we're being tempted with day in, day out by the shaitan. So As an explanation, Rasulullah ﷺ says that there's two wolves, and that they're not just two wolves, they're two ravenous wolves, very hungry. Their hunger is to the level of greed. That's what that means. So these two wolves come to a flock of sheep. And because of them being wolves, first of all, and being ravenous wolves, extremely hungry to the point of being greedy due to the hunger, it's saying that they are going to attack each and every one of those sheep. And whether they're not going to, attack just a few of those sheep, enough to eat, they're going to wipe out the entire flock, not even spare a single sheep, even though they cannot possibly eat all the sheep at that time. Still, because of that ravenous hunger, that's what they're going to do. So no sheep will survive from these two wolves. The other thing we have to keep in mind, or what the hadith is telling us, is the flock of sheep is there at the nighttime in this example. So there's the cover of darkness. Also, there's no shepherd, Rasulullah ﷺ says, for these sheep to protect them from the wolves. So this is telling us even more that not only are these wolves going to be able to, annihilate the entire flock, but they're going to be able to do it very easily. There's no even obstacle or challenge. There's no shepherd to try to chase them away. It's in the cover of darkness where, which will help them. First of all, they will be able to sneak up on these sheep very easily without being seen. And the sheep, because of the darkness, won't even know where to go, which direction to turn, how to get help. So it's saying that the wolves will very easily, kill all those sheep. And this also means that it will be fast, because there's no obstacle and there's no challenge to these wolves. So in this analogy, of course, brothers and sisters, Rasulullah ﷺ is saying that the two wolves are, number one wolf is the love of wealth that we as human beings have. The other wolf, the second wolf, is the love of status, which, us being human beings, it's natural for us to love status. And of course, the sheep in the night without shepherd represents our deen. So the hadith is saying, of course, now, it's clear that, the love of wealth and the love of status, if we have that, if we don't, do the things to avoid that, if we cannot avoid the temptation of shaitan, then these two wolves, called the love of wealth and the love of status, they will eat all of our deen, just like all the sheep will be eaten. None of the deen will be left. And it will be so easy and so fast and so total. So the deen will be completely undermined, destroyed. And of course, brothers and sisters, this would lead to the enslavement to the dunya, and very little regard, if any regard, because to our deen and to the akhirah. So brothers and sisters, that's a big test, and let us know that this is the age-old, very old, and very kind of, very old deception of shaitan. It's one of the most frequent traps that the shaitan uses. We're all being tempted by this day in, day out, no matter where we are, very applicable to our situation today, where yes, we face hardships, but alhamdulillah, in general, we face a lot of ease, or at least many of us do. So we have to be careful we do not fall victim to the deception of shaitan. Now, in one khutbah recently, I talked also about the nafs. You know, the nafs also tempts us with with desires, and it becomes stronger the more we, in terms, of course, if we commit sins, it will become stronger. If we eat too much, it'll become stronger. If we drink too much, it'll become stronger. If we sleep even too much, if we give all the things that it desires, it will become strong. And one thing to keep in mind is that the nafs can never be satisfied. It's insatiable. It's not like you give a whole bunch of food, or you give whatever it desires, lots of it, that the nafs is going to say, okay, I've had enough, I'm not going to bother you anymore. That does not happen. So we know that the shayateen are chained in the month of Ramadan. However, we notice that we're still tempted to do, at least we experience the temptation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not make us succumb to that, but we feel the temptation. So where is that coming from? One explanation is that it's coming from our nafs. Nafs, because our nafs is not chained. So if our nafs has become strong, it will continue to bother us and tempt us to do wrong things. Now, brothers and sisters, this craving for love and status is part of a chain reaction. Wahab bin Munabbih, one of the early scholars, he said, from following desires comes the desire for the world. From the desire for this world comes the love of wealth and the love of status. And from the love of wealth and the love of status comes making lawful that which is forbidden. So it's, if our deen has been completely, annihilated, then of course, it's our deen that controls us, makes us do right, drives us to do right, and helps us to forbid wrong or evil. So if we don't have that, then people who get tempted in this way may be willing to do the unlawful for the sake of their hunger for wealth and status. So as I was saying, brothers and sisters, that prosperity and wealth are a big test. And as I said, the trials of pain and loss are very difficult. We know that. But prosperity is also a test. For example, Abdurrahman bin Auf, radiallahu anh, he said, we were tested with hardship alongside Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we were patient. So he's saying we were tested with hardship, but we were patient. Then we were tested with prosperity after that, and we were not patient. We could not be patient. So we live in a day and an age where we're blessed, not all of us, but many of us, especially as I said, in this part of the world, blessed with prosperity. So this is actually a big, big test. So actually wealth is a special test, a difficult test for this ummah. Why is that? Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that. He said, Inna li kulli ummatin fitna, wa fitnatu ummati al-mal. He said, verily, every nation has a trial, and the trial of my nation is wealth. So that's why we have to always be on guard from the temptation of our nafs and the temptation of the shaitan. Now, moving on, this craving for and this love for wealth and status drives some behaviors that we have to be careful of. One of those behaviors is called tabdhir. Now, we loosely translate that as spendthrift, but I don't know if that word captures the actual meaning. So let me try to define it. Tabdhid means we spend on things that are unnecessary. So something that we actually, certain things we need food, we need clothing. But we end up spending on things sometimes that are absolutely unnecessary. So what's the ruling about tabdhid? The tabdhid is actually haram. So we have to be careful. So it's linked to wealth and status, because to increase our status, we may go out to buy one of the fancy gadgets, let's say, as an example, home entertainment systems that we don't really need. It's not a necessity. Or a very fancy one. So this, of course, is an issue that if we spend on something that's unnecessary, actually comes under this definition of tabdhid. The Quran uses very strong words for those who indulge in tabdhid. It says in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا إِخْوَانَ الشَّيَاطِينَ وَكَانَ الشَّيْطَانُ لِرَبِّهِ كَفُورًا. Verily, the spendthrifts, mubadhirin, are brothers of the shayateen, and the shaitan is ever ungrateful to his Lord. So I remind myself and all of us together to be careful from this very big trap of the shaitan. Now, there is one other thing we discuss in this regards, and that's in regards to israf. So israf, what is the definition here? It's a little different. This means to spend on things that are necessary, but you go to an extravagant level, a luxurious level, an unnecessary level, a wasteful level, or go overboard. Okay. So the ruling about this also not permissible, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya bani Adam, khudhu zinatakum inda kulli masjid, wa kulu washrabu, wa la tusrifu, innahu la yuhibbul musrifin. O children of Adam, take your adornment to every place of prayer and eat and drink, but waste not by extravagance. Certainly, He, Allah, does not like those who waste by extravagance. So here the ayah is talking about food and drink, which are necessities. We need to spend on those because we need those to survive. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, don't make israf, don't go overboard, don't be extravagant, don't waste. It is talking about food and drink, but it is, israf is general. In anything that's a necessity, if we go overboard in it, on spending on that, this would become israf. So some examples that, we need clothing to make ourselves look nice and to cover our aura. That can be done, say, with X dollars of money. So israf would be like buying clothing is not israf, basic, decent clothing. But if we start to spend on very expensive clothing, like the designer labels, so that we'll have this sharaf, this status, like the hadith was talking about. So we want to increase our status, that we're wearing very expensive clothes, brand name clothes, designer clothes. Okay, it's more than what we need. We just need to cover our aura and look decent. This would be israf, one example. Also in clothing, another example would be is that, yes, we need X amount of clothes. Okay, we need maybe, some clothes that, obviously that are on our body, and some extras clothing, okay, because we can't wash it all the time. But we don't need, hundreds or dozens of, shirts and dozens of shoes and things like that. So here, either going into something that's very expensive, although it's spent on something necessary, but it's too much expenditure, or having too much of it in general. So many of us need transportation. So especially where some of us live in the suburbs, so we need a car to get us from point A to B, but we don't need a luxurious, fancy car with a name that shows that, that we use to show off. Also, a home, we need shelter. It's one of the necessities of life. Nothing wrong to spend on shelter, but it doesn't have to be so huge and so fancy. We don't want to commit israf that way. And food as well. We need food. The ayah is talking about food and drink. We need food to, keep us alive. But do we need extravagant food, fancy food? Do we need so much food? And I think I talked about that, I think 2 khutbahs ago, to a large extent. Now, brothers and sisters, another thing that could happen with this love of wealth and status is we could fall in the trap of shuh. And this is very serious. We know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ وَاسْمَعُوا وَأَطِيعُوا وَأَنْفِقُوا خَيْرًا لِأَنفُسِكُمْ وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. So keep your duty to Allah and fear Him as much as you can. Listen and obey, and spend it in charity. That is better for yourselves. And so whosoever is saved from his own shuh, then they are the successful ones. So what is the definition of shuh? Definition of shuh is, we could call it bukhl in Arabic. Bukhl meaning miserliness. So this, of course, also is haram. And brothers and sisters, we keep in mind that this is a serious matter. Somebody who has shuh in their heart will not be able to have iman in their heart. Rasulullah ﷺ said, وَلَا يَجْتَمِعُ شُحٌ وَإِيمَانٌ فِي قَلْبِ رَجُلٍ مُسْلِمٍ. He said that this miserliness and iman will not combine in the heart of a Muslim. It's either one or the other. So how could we commit shuh by this love of wealth and status, that we love the wealth and the status so much that we don't want to give away any of our wealth, part with any of our wealth, out of, such a person becomes so miserly because they don't want any reduction in their wealth, which might also mean a reduction in their status. So they become miserly, and they fall into the trap this hadith is talking about. Also, brothers and sisters, shuh tempts to great sins. Rasulullah ﷺ said, اتقوا الشح فإن الشح أهلك من كان قبلكم أمرهم بالقطيعة فقطعوا وأمرهم بالبخل فبخلوا وأمرهم بالفجور ففجروا. Rasulullah ﷺ said, beware of shuh, for indeed shuh destroyed those who came before you. It ordered them to cut off the ties of relations with their relatives, so they cut those off. And it ordered them to be miserly, so they were miserly. And it ordered them to commit sins, so they committed sins. So an easy example to see how this could happen is, we have, let's say, a relative, even could be a close relative, and they need help, let's say, for example, but we don't want to help them. We have, and we could help them, but we don't want to, because if we're affected by shuh, we're miserly, we don't want to part with anything, and especially we don't want to give it for sadaqah. Somebody who's miserly doesn't even want to spend on themselves, their clothes and food and things like that. What about giving sadaqah? They would never spend for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why it's such a dangerous thing. And as far as committing sins, that person might be driven to cheat and to lie, in order to save money, whatever way they can, by cheating and lying. So brothers and sisters, I hope it's very clear that all this, what we've discussed, forms a very big test. So one aspect of the test, of course, is that it distracts. If we fall into this trap, which we're being tempted with, as I said, day and night, it distracts us so much from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, anything related to the akhirah, anything related to our deen. So we'll be consumed with the dunya and getting more wealth, trying to satisfy our nafs, listening to the temptation of the shaitan, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid. We'll expend so much energy, so much time, and we won't have time for our deen. And yet we'll never feel satisfied, never content. That's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, what is better? He said, مَا قَلَّ وَكَفَى خَيْرٌ مِمَّا كَثُرَ وَأَلْهَى. He said, what is little, but it is sufficient. If you have a little bit, and it suffices you. You have enough food, alhamdulillah. You have enough clothing, alhamdulillah. You have a decent shelter, protects you from the elements, alhamdulillah. This is far better than having a lot, but it becomes a distraction, that it distracts. Because what is it distracting away from? It would be distracting away from our deen, from Allah, from the akhirah. So brothers and sisters, I know we're close to the time. I remind myself first that, if we get distracted or consumed with the dunya, what are we getting distracted for? What are we working so hard for? Let us remind ourselves of the hadith you all know. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Wallahi, this world in comparison with the hereafter is nothing more than as if one of you put his finger, and then he gestured with his forefinger. It's nothing more than as if one of you put his finger in the sea, let him see how much water he would retrieve. And as we know, that would be practically nothing compared to the ocean or the sea. So if we let ourselves being neglected, we're being neglected from the akhirah for the sake of the dunya. We would be letting ourselves be neglected from our salah, from, studying and reading the Quran, from studying the deen, from looking after our relatives, let's say, or visiting the sick. So sometimes, as you know, we make announcements on a regular basis, and one of the purposes that we go and visit the sick. So if we're distracted and consumed with the dunya, we won't see the value. What's the value of going and visiting the sick? If we've been tempted by shuh, we'll say, well, why should I go to the hospital? It's expensive parking there, etc., etc. Why should I visit the sick? Not knowing, and they would be distracted from the fact, or they would forget that, if we go visit the sick, for just using this as an example for a minute, we are submerged in the mercy and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the whole time we're visiting a sick person. So also about the dunya, reminding us not to be distracted by it, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the space of a whip in Al-Jannah, just the space of the whip in Al-Jannah, talking about, comparing the akhirah now, the space of a whip in Al-Jannah is better than this world and everything in it. So a tiny, tiny space in Al-Jannah, and Al-Jannah is so huge. That tiny space of Al-Jannah is better than this world and everything in it. I think we've run out of time, so I will close with one reminder that sums up the whole situation, inshallah. Actually, before I go to the last one, I have one more thing that would be nice to share. A reminder that, we know that we're not taking this with us anywhere to our grave. And I think I mentioned that in the last few weeks as well. A reminder, I mean, that, the saying of some wise men, they said, they were told, Inna fulanan jama' al-mal, that such and such person has amassed wealth. So the wise scholars asked, فَهَلْ جَمَعَ أَيَّامًا يُنْفِقُهُ فِيهَا? So they said, has that person amassed days? Or you could say, time, in other words, time, so in the form of days. Has that person amassed days in which to spend it in? Have they accumulated more days in their life for them to spend it? If they've gotten so much wealth, they need time to spend it. So it was said, no. So he said, they said, ma jama'a shay'a, then he has amassed nothing. It amounts to absolutely nothing. And Abu Darda, I think I shared this a while back, radiallahu anh, he said, of what benefit is the increase in wealth when our lifetime decreases? So brothers and sisters, let us remind ourselves to end and conclude with Al-Qadr, that some of the Salaf and scholars, they said, إِذَا كَانَ الْقَدْرُ حَقًّا فَالْحَرْصُ بَاطِلٌ. So this summarizes it. They said, since the Qadr is true, if we truly believe the Qadr is true, then craving is futile. To be hungry for it and greedy for it, there's no point to that. We're not saying the person doesn't go and work and do their job and earn a living and try. But to be like craving for it is no point. As long as we do our job and we try and don't be lazy, still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through the qadr is going to give us what he's written for us. But to be greedy for it, there is absolutely, it's senseless actually. So brothers and sisters, from the perspective of this pandemic, it's kind of a good reminder, because we may be reminded, that the situation's upon us. Maybe we're facing some financial hardship. We're having to isolate. We're having to simplify our lives, and in the self-isolation, hopefully we're remembering, trying to make more dhikr, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be with our family, all those good things. So, reminding us that no amount of wealth can protect us from any test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there are many good messages from this pandemic situation, although it's a difficulty. So brothers and sisters, I stopped there. I went a little bit over time. I'm not sure if there's any questions or any comments. I could try. Otherwise, I always prefer that if you can email them to admin@masjidfarooq.com. That's helpful. It gives me a time to look after those when I have a moment. So, Jazakumullah khairan. So I hope it was beneficial. So Jazakumullah khairan for your feedback. Let's just give maybe like 10, 15 more seconds if there's any comment or question. Reminder again that, of course, we're continuing this throughout the month of Ramadan. Tomorrow will be Sheikh Malik Claire, excellent speaker. You've seen him, every day. Twice a week, alhamdulillah. So that will be he'll be with us, inshallah. And then on the weekend we'll have on Saturday actually we'll have Sheikh Murad joining us from Alberta once again. So please stay tuned to all these things. Please have a look at our YouTube videos as well. We're releasing some videos about the Phase 2 project, and even one we released today, a very nice one about the history of Masjid Al-Farooq from the beginning to the end, very short. So please have a look at that. So brothers and sisters, looks like there's no comments or, there's no more questions. So Jazakumullah khairan for your time and attention as usual. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you a blessed iftar, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all our fasting and all our ibadat. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.